Audie Murphy revealed the 9 Golden Age stars who were actually evil. He was America's most decorated World War II combat soldier, a warrior who single-handedly held off 6 German tanks and 250 infantry, a humble farm boy from Texas who killed or wounded 240 enemy soldiers and earned every medal for valor his country could bestow, including the Medal of Honor. When Audie Murphy came to Hollywood, studios saw a handsome young hero they could transform into a movie star. What they didn't expect was his unflinching moral code and ability to see through the artificial glamour of Tinseltown to the darkness beneath. Audie faced death countless times in Europe, revealed a former MGM producer who worked with Murphy in the 1950s. He knew real courage, real evil, and real character. The fake personas of Hollywood couldn't fool him. He saw right through them. According to those who knew him well, Murphy maintained a mental list of Hollywood stars whose public images were complete fabrications. Actors and actresses who presented themselves as heroes, patriots, or moral exemplars, while privately engaging in behavior Murphy found genuinely evil. Tonight, we reveal the 9 Golden Age stars who Audie Murphy, America's greatest real-life hero, reportedly exposed as villains far more dangerous than the ones he faced on screen. But first, we need to understand why Murphy, a reluctant celebrity who struggled with his own demons, was uniquely positioned to recognize the darkness behind Hollywood's most beloved faces. The real hero in a land of pretenders. Audie Murphy arrived in Hollywood in 1945 as the most decorated American soldier of World War II. Unlike the actors who played war heroes on screen, Murphy had lived through hell, witnessing the deaths of countless friends, killing enemy soldiers at close range, and performing acts of almost unbelievable courage under fire. Audie knew what real bravery looked like, explained a veteran who served with Murphy and later visited him in Hollywood. He'd seen men sacrifice themselves for their buddies. He'd also seen cowards who talked tough but ran when the bullets started flying. That experience gave him a sixth sense about phonies. Murphy's own transition to civilian life was far from smooth. He suffered from what we now recognize as severe PTSD, experiencing nightmares, sleeping with a gun under his pillow, and battling addiction to sleeping pills. These struggles gave him insight into human frailty and a deep empathy for those facing genuine challenges. What he couldn't abide, according to those who knew him, was the hypocrisy of stars who crafted public images completely at odds with their private behavior. Audie didn't expect people to be perfect, noted his longtime friend and fellow veteran. He just expected them to be honest. The stars who made his list weren't there because they had flaws. We all have those. They made the list because they were living lies.
You know, it's a kind word in a hard, cruel world. News has just come through from Hollywood that you've been nominated for an Academy Award. Yes, isn't that something?
1. Errol Flynn, the swashbuckling star with Nazi sympathies. Errol Flynn embodied swashbuckling heroism on screen, playing characters who fought for justice and defended the innocent in films like Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood. According to Murphy's private assessments, Flynn's real character couldn't have been further from these heroic roles. Rumors of sympathies, relationships with underage girls, and assault allegations dogged Flynn throughout his career, explained a former studio publicist. Most fans never knew, but industry insiders, including Murphy, were well aware of the disturbing realities behind Flynn's charming facade. Flynn's suspected Nazi sympathies particularly disturbed Murphy, who had witnessed firsthand the horrors perpetrated by the Third Reich. According to multiple sources, Flynn expressed admiration for Hitler and fascist ideology during the 1930s and even allegedly attempted to meet with Nazis during a European trip before America entered the war. Audie allegedly refused to appear at the same veteran events as Flynn, revealed a former USO coordinator. He told organizers, "I didn't fight in Europe to come home and shake hands with their admirers." Flynn's personal life was equally troubling. In 1942, he was tried for the statutory assault of 2 underage girls, and while he was ultimately acquitted, the trial revealed patterns of predatory behavior toward young women. Throughout his career, Flynn faced multiple allegations of sexual assault and misconduct that studios worked diligently to suppress. Audie said Flynn could act like a patriot, but couldn't pass the smell test of a real one, recalled a fellow actor who worked with both men. Murphy believed true character revealed itself in private moments, not public performances. By that measure, he found Flynn contemptible. What made Flynn particularly offensive to Murphy was the stark contrast between his heroic screen persona and his deeply problematic private behavior. As someone who understood the true meaning of courage and sacrifice, Murphy reportedly felt Flynn's portrayal of heroic characters represented a form of stolen valor, appropriating the mantle of heroism while embodying none of its genuine qualities. Murphy's assessment of Flynn seems to have been validated by history. Flynn's reputation has continued to deteriorate as more details of his private life have emerged, revealing a man whose charm masked a disturbing blend of predatory behavior, political extremism, and moral bankruptcy.
Well, from my standpoint, he should be remembered as one of the finest human beings I ever knew in my life. And of course, multi-talented. He was a wonderful, wonderful boy.
2. Frank Sinatra, the voice with mob connections. Frank Sinatra was America's most beloved singer, the smooth-voiced crooner who made women swoon and dominated popular culture for decades. Behind the sophisticated image and undeniable talent, however, Murphy allegedly recognized something far more sinister, a man whose ties to organized crime and willingness to use violence and intimidation revealed a character at odds with his carefully crafted public persona. Ties to organized crime, allegedly threatened journalists, sabotaged careers, and bought silence, noted a former Hollywood columnist who claimed knowledge of Sinatra's darker activities. Murphy served with men of genuine loyalty and honor. He saw Sinatra's version as a corrupt perversion of those values. Sinatra's connections to organized crime figures like Sam Giancana, Lucky Luciano, and Carlo Gambino were an open secret in Hollywood, but carefully hidden from the general public. These weren't merely casual associations. According to multiple accounts, Sinatra served as an intermediary between the mob and Hollywood, helped launder money through casino investments, and leveraged these connections to advance his career and intimidate rivals. Murphy respected loyalty, but not when it came in a tailored suit with blood on the cuffs, said a former fellow actor who knew both men. Audie saw how Sinatra used fear to control people. That wasn't the leadership he respected from the battlefield. Particularly troubling to Murphy were reports of Sinatra's treatment of journalists and critics who dared to cross him. Multiple reporters who wrote unflattering stories about Sinatra allegedly faced threats, property damage, or physical intimidation. In one notorious incident, columnist Lee Mortimer claimed he was physically attacked by Sinatra and his entourage after writing critically about the singer. Sinatra's volatile temper and willingness to use connections to destroy careers also reportedly disturbed Murphy. Various accounts describe Sinatra blacklisting performers who offended him, pressuring venues not to book his enemies, and using his influence with studio executives to block projects involving those who had crossed him. For someone like Murphy, who had seen real violence and its consequences, Sinatra's casual wielding of threat and intimidation seemed especially reprehensible, explained a Hollywood historian. It wasn't just that Sinatra had mob ties, it was that he embraced their methods and mentality while presenting himself as an American icon. The contrast between Sinatra's public image as a sophisticated entertainer and patriotic American and his private behavior reportedly struck Murphy as a particularly dangerous form of deception. While audiences saw the charming performer singing about love and loyalty, Murphy allegedly recognized a man whose understanding of those concepts had been corrupted by power and ambition.
The things we have to accomplish. I'm going to tell them that the wealthiest nation in the world is a failure unless it's also the healthiest nation in the world.
3. Spencer Tracy, the beloved star with a dark side. Spencer Tracy projected an image of solid decency in films like Boys Town and Judgment at Nuremberg. His long relationship with Katharine Hepburn has been romanticized as one of Hollywood's great love stories. According to Murphy's private observations, the real Tracy was a troubled, often cruel man whose alcoholism fueled abusive behavior that few fans ever glimpsed. Known for violent alcoholism and abusive behavior behind the scenes, revealed a former studio employee who worked on several Tracy films. Murphy, who struggled with his own demons after the war, had compassion for addiction, but not for how Tracy treated others during his worst episodes. Tracy's alcoholism was well documented, but carefully managed by studios to protect his wholesome image. According to numerous accounts, his drinking binges could last for days, and frequently resulted in verbal and sometimes physical abuse toward those around him. Sets would sometimes shut down for days, while Tracy recovered from drinking episodes, costing studios enormous sums that they willingly paid to protect one of their most valuable stars. Secretly tormented co-stars and even Hepburn, despite the public love story, claimed a makeup artist who worked with both Tracy and Hepburn. Their relationship has been mythologized, but the reality included Hepburn enduring verbal abuse, emotional manipulation, and betrayal throughout their years together. What particularly disturbed Murphy about Tracy was the complete disconnect between his on-screen persona as a man of integrity and his real-life treatment of colleagues, especially those with less power. According to those who knew Murphy, he found Tracy's behavior toward crew members, the electricians, camera operators, and set builders who kept productions running, especially revealing of his true character. Audie didn't care about box office. He cared about who you were when no one was watching, explained a fellow actor who worked with both men. He noticed how Tracy would charm important directors and executives while treating working-class crew members with contempt. That told Murphy everything he needed to know. Tracy's complexity made him a particularly interesting case for Murphy. Unlike some stars on his list who were simply calculating or corrupt, Tracy seemed genuinely tormented by his own failings. His Catholic guilt, struggles with alcoholism, and conflicted feelings about his relationship with Hepburn, which conflicted with his religious beliefs, created a man at war with himself. This internal conflict manifested in extreme behavior, periods of charm and generosity alternating with episodes of cruelty and abuse. For Murphy, who understood the psychological toll of trauma and guilt, Tracy represented something perhaps more tragic than evil, a man with the potential for goodness who repeatedly succumbed to his worst impulses. Murphy believed in redemption. He had seen too much darkness not to hope for light, said a close friend. But he also believed in accountability, and he found Hollywood's willingness to enable and excuse Tracy's behavior deeply troubling.
Well, it is in a way, Mr. Fields. We'd like to know to what you attribute your great strength and trim figure.
4. W.C. Fields, the misanthropic comedian. W.C. Fields created a comic persona as a misanthropic, child-hating, alcohol-loving misfit that delighted audiences who assumed it was mostly an act. According to Murphy's private assessments, Fields' on-screen character was less a performance than a slightly exaggerated version of his authentic self, a man whose genuine misanthropy and cruelty were passed off as comedy. Beloved comedian, but cruel, antisocial, and deeply hateful behind the scenes, said a former studio worker who encountered Fields regularly. Murphy, who had seen the worst of humanity in combat, was disturbed by how Fields seemed to genuinely despise people, especially children, rather than just playing a character. Fields' legendary alcoholism wasn't a comic exaggeration. He reportedly drank 2 quarts of liquor daily for decades. Unlike Tracy, whose drinking fueled episodes of abuse followed by remorse, Fields' consumption seemed to merely intensify the caustic personality that existed even when he was sober. Known to insult children, staff, and spew bigotry in private, recalled a former child actor who worked with Fields. The studios presented it as all part of his comic persona, but there was nothing funny about how he treated vulnerable people when cameras weren't rolling. What particularly troubled Murphy about Fields was how the entertainment industry repackaged genuine cruelty as harmless comedy. According to those close to Murphy, he found it disturbing that audiences were essentially laughing at real hatred and meanness that had been branded as entertainment. Audie once said, "Some men drink to forget. He drank because he already had," remembered a fellow actor. Murphy thought Fields had fundamentally given up on humanity, a perspective Audie could never accept despite everything he'd witnessed in the war. Fields' treatment of children reportedly struck Murphy as especially revealing. While his on-screen antipathy toward children was played for laughs, his off-screen behavior toward young actors was genuinely hurtful. Multiple accounts describe Fields deliberately intimidating child performers, making demeaning comments about their appearance or talent, and creating a hostile environment that left many in tears. For Murphy, who maintained a special compassion for children despite his combat experiences, or perhaps because of them, Fields' behavior toward young performers revealed a meanness of spirit that couldn't be excused as mere comedy or artistic temperament. Murphy believed in dignity, treating people with basic respect regardless of their status or power, explained a longtime associate. He found Fields' willingness to punch down, to target those who couldn't fight back, particularly contemptible. The contrast between Fields' popularity with audiences and his private behavior created what Murphy reportedly viewed as a particularly insidious form of deception, conditioning the public to laugh at genuine cruelty and dismiss real character flaws as mere entertainment.
A different kind of actresses. Yes.
5. Joan Crawford, the screen queen's reign of terror. Joan Crawford crafted an image as Hollywood royalty, the ultimate self-made star who rose from poverty to epitomize glamour, strength, and sophistication. Behind this carefully constructed facade, according to Murphy's private observations, lurked a woman capable of extraordinary cruelty, particularly toward those most vulnerable to her power. Allegations of child abuse, mommy dearest, manipulation, and tyrannical behavior, noted a former studio publicist who worked with both Crawford and Murphy. While the public saw a strong, independent woman, Murphy glimpsed something far darker, someone who used power to hurt rather than protect. Crawford's abuse of her adopted children, later detailed in her daughter Christina's memoir, Mommy Dearest, represented the most disturbing aspect of her private behavior. While some have questioned the memoir's accuracy, multiple contemporaries corroborated Christina's accounts of physical and emotional abuse, including Crawford's legendary rages, extreme punishments, and psychological manipulation. Audie's co-star once said, "He couldn't even say her name without a shudder," revealed a makeup artist who worked on a film featuring both Murphy and Crawford. For someone like Audie, who had seen genuine evil during the war, recognizing those same patterns of control and cruelty in a beloved American actress was deeply disturbing. Beyond her treatment of her children, Crawford was notorious for her behavior toward household staff, studio employees, and anyone she perceived as beneath her. Former maids, assistants, and studio workers described a woman obsessed with control, cleanliness, and deference, who would explode in rage over minor infractions and seem to take pleasure in humiliating those who served her. Audie saw cruelty up close. He said hers didn't need a battlefield, just a living room, recalled a fellow veteran who knew Murphy. He found it particularly revealing that Crawford reserved her worst behavior for situations where she had absolute power, at home with her children, or on set with subordinates who couldn't fight back. What made Crawford especially troubling to Murphy was the complete disconnection between her public persona as a strong, sophisticated woman and her private behavior. While she championed herself as a symbol of female independence and resilience, she allegedly used her power to terrorize rather than mentor younger women in the industry. Murphy had a particular distaste for people who played roles off-screen as well as on, explained a former co-star. Crawford wasn't just acting in movies. Her entire public identity was a carefully crafted performance designed to hide the troubled, abusive person beneath. For Murphy, whose own childhood had been marked by poverty and hardship, Crawford's treatment of her privileged children seemed especially unconscionable. According to those who knew him, Murphy believed that power and success created greater responsibility toward others, a principle Crawford seemed to completely reject in her private life.
Dennis a little unsettled tonight. He went up to Lum Fong's for dinner and got one of those Chinese fortune cookies, and it said, "Congratulations, you now have Asian flu."
6. George Sanders, the cultivated cynic. George Sanders specialized in playing sophisticated, cynical villains whose cultured exteriors masked cruel intentions. According to Murphy's private assessments, Sanders' screen persona was less a performance than an extension of his authentic self, a man whose contempt for others was real, not merely acted. Cynical, arrogant, openly hostile to anyone he deemed beneath him, said a former co-star who worked with both Sanders and Murphy. While many actors play villains but are lovely people off-screen, Sanders seemed to genuinely share the elitist disdain of his most famous characters. Sanders made no secret of his misanthropy, openly expressing contempt for what he considered the stupidity of the general public, the vulgarity of American culture, and the tedium of human interaction. While some dismissed these pronouncements as part of his cultivated image as a worldly cynic, Murphy reportedly recognized something more genuinely disturbing in Sanders' outlook. Audie called him a poison, charming on the outside, toxic at the core, recalled a director who worked with both men. Murphy had seen real evil in war, and he recognized in Sanders a different kind, the casual cruelty of a man who found humanity itself contemptible. Sanders' treatment of those he considered beneath him, particularly working-class crew members, assistants, and service staff, reportedly revealed his true character. Multiple accounts describe him refusing to learn names, making demeaning comments about appearance or intelligence, and creating an atmosphere of fear and humiliation for those forced to work with him. What particularly disturbed Murphy about Sanders was his intellectual justification for cruelty. Unlike some stars whose bad behavior stemmed from insecurity or addiction, Sanders presented his contempt for others as a rational, even enlightened perspective, the natural conclusion of a superior mind observing human folly. Eventually, took his own life, leaving a note that read, "I'm bored," noted a Hollywood historian. That final statement seemed to confirm what Murphy had observed, a man so disconnected from human empathy and meaning that even his own existence had become tedious to him. For Murphy, who had witnessed extreme suffering and profound courage during the war, Sanders' nihilistic worldview represented a particularly empty form of evil, not the passionate hatred of an ideologue or the mindless cruelty of a sadist, but the cold indifference of someone who had rejected the value of human connection entirely. Murphy believed in service, that we find meaning by contributing to something larger than ourselves, explained a fellow veteran. Sanders represented the opposite philosophy, that nothing matters, that cruelty and kindness are equally meaningless, that the only rational response to existence is cynical detachment. The tragic end to Sanders' life in 1972, when he took an overdose of barbiturates in a Spanish hotel room, seemed to confirm Murphy's assessment of the emptiness at his core. His death note, "Dear world, I am leaving because I am bored. I feel I have lived long enough. I am leaving you with your worries in this sweet cesspool. Good luck," revealed a man who had found neither purpose nor connection in his 65 years.
And now today you've told us a new story entirely. The question is, Miss Frank, were you lying then? Are you lying now?
7. Charles Laughton, the brilliant tyrant. Charles Laughton was one of Hollywood's most acclaimed actors, delivering landmark performances in films like The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Witness for the Prosecution, and Mutiny on the Bounty. Behind his artistic brilliance, according to Murphy's private observations, lurked a man whose treatment of colleagues, particularly young or vulnerable performers, revealed a disturbing capacity for cruelty. Behind-the-scenes tyrant, emotionally abusive to actors and assistants, revealed a former script supervisor who worked on several Laughton productions. Murphy, who understood legitimate authority from his military experience, saw in Laughton something very different, power wielded not to elevate others but to degrade them. Laughton's tyrannical behavior on set was legendary among industry insiders, but carefully hidden from the public. According to numerous accounts, he would deliberately humiliate less experienced actors, making demeaning comments about their appearance, intelligence, or talent in front of entire casts and crews. These were not constructive criticisms aimed at improving performances, but seemed designed specifically to establish dominance and instill fear. Allegedly enjoyed humiliating young performers, said a former actor who worked with Laughton early in his career. He would identify someone's deepest insecurity or vulnerability, then repeatedly target it until they broke down. He seemed to find pleasure in the process. What particularly disturbed Murphy about Laughton was how his undeniable genius was used to justify behavior that would never be tolerated in other contexts. Studios, directors, and fellow actors excused his abusive tendencies as the necessary eccentricities of a brilliant artist, creating a system where Laughton's victims had no recourse and his behavior faced no consequences. Audie believed in discipline, not degradation. He hated cruelty dressed as genius, explained a fellow actor who knew Murphy well. Having served under officers who inspired men to greatness through respect rather than fear, he found Laughton's approach to leadership particularly repugnant. Laughton's treatment of crew members, the camera operators, lighting technicians, and production assistants who kept his films running reportedly revealed his true character more clearly than any other aspect of his behavior. According to multiple accounts, he would refuse to learn their names, make demeaning comments about their appearance or background, and create an atmosphere of such tension that many experienced professionals would request transfers to avoid working with him. For Murphy, who had developed a profound respect for the contributions of ordinary soldiers during the war, Laughton's disdain for the working professionals of the film industry seemed to reveal a fundamental character flaw, an inability to recognize the dignity and value of every person's contribution. Murphy believed true greatness included how you treated people who couldn't do anything for you, noted a longtime associate. By that measure, he found Laughton's genius severely compromised by his apparent contempt for those he considered beneath his station. The contrast between Lawton's sensitive, humane performances on screen and his reported behavior toward colleagues created what Murphy viewed as a particularly troubling disconnect. Art that explored the depths of human emotion created by someone who seemed incapable of basic empathy in his professional relationships.
You're a low personality. Obviously out of the gutter. Maybe that's why I'm attracted to you.
8. Tallulah Bankhead, the uninhibited narcissist. Tallulah Bankhead was known for her uninhibited personality, throaty voice, and outrageous behavior both on and off screen. Her flamboyant persona and disregard for convention made her a fascinating figure to the public. According to Murphy's private assessments, however, Bankhead's boundary-crossing behavior wasn't merely harmless eccentricity, but reflected a profound narcissism that left damage in its wake. Wild, narcissistic, and emotionally abusive to lovers and co-stars, said a former assistant who worked closely with Bankhead. While the public saw an exciting free spirit, Murphy recognized something more troubling, someone whose liberation often came at others' expense. Bankhead's treatment of household staff and assistants reportedly revealed the darker side of her uninhibited personality. According to multiple accounts, she would make outrageous demands at all hours, throw tantrums when her wishes weren't immediately fulfilled, and create an atmosphere of chaos and fear among those who worked for her. Once called her own maid subhuman in front of dinner guests, recalled a former Hollywood hostess who witnessed the incident. What shocked everyone wasn't just the comment itself, but how casually she said it, as though the woman's humanity was so irrelevant it hardly merited consideration. What particularly disturbed Murphy about Bankhead was how her behavior towards service staff revealed a profound sense of entitlement and class prejudice that contradicted her public image as a progressive, boundary-breaking rebel. While she positioned herself as someone who challenged social conventions, her treatment of those with less power suggested she fully embraced the most elitist aspects of her privileged upbringing. Audie never judged sin, but he hated entitlement, explained a fellow actor who knew Murphy well. Having grown up in poverty in rural Texas, he was particularly sensitive to how the wealthy and powerful sometimes treated working people. Bankhead's behavior toward her staff struck him as revealing her true character. Bankhead's narcissism extended beyond her treatment of employees to her relationships with lovers and co-stars. Multiple accounts describe her manipulative behavior, emotional volatility, and willingness to exploit others' vulnerabilities for her own gratification or amusement. While these tendencies were often dismissed as part of her larger-than-life personality, Murphy reportedly recognized them as manifestations of a fundamentally exploitative character. For someone like Murphy, who had witnessed both extraordinary courage and disturbing cruelty during wartime, Bankhead represented a particular type of civilian evil, the casual dehumanization of others for one's own convenience or entertainment. Her behavior toward those with less power wasn't the result of battlefield trauma or extraordinary circumstances, but seemed to stem from a core belief in her own superiority and exemption from normal human consideration. Murphy had a simple test for character, said a longtime friend. He watched how people treated those who could do nothing for them: waiters, maids, junior crew members. By that measure, he found Bankhead's character deeply wanting. The contrast between Bankhead's image as a liberated, convention-defying personality and her reported treatment of vulnerable people created what Murphy viewed as a particularly insidious form of hypocrisy, using the language of freedom and rebellion to disguise what was essentially selfish and exploitative behavior.
In the top hierarchy of demons, of Beelzebub, Belial, Leviathan, and the name that Kratos feared to write, Asmodeus, Prince of Legendary Lord of Corruption.
9. Gig Young, the charming facade with a murderous core. Gig Young built his career playing charming, slightly world-weary characters who exuded sophisticated wit and understated masculinity. He won an Academy Award for his role in They Shoot Horses, Don't They?, and maintained an image as one of Hollywood's most likable leading men. According to Murphy's private observations, Young's affable exterior concealed profound psychological darkness that would eventually erupt in the most tragic way imaginable. Seemed charming, but struggled with addiction, rage, and murdered his wife before killing himself, noted a former co-star who worked with both Young and Murphy. While others saw only the polished performer, Murphy sensed the volatility beneath the surface, the danger hidden behind the smile. Young's battles with alcoholism were well known within the industry, but carefully concealed from the public. Unlike some actors whose drinking created public spectacles, Young maintained a functional facade while privately consuming enormous quantities of alcohol and later barbiturates. These substances didn't create his darker tendencies, but removed the inhibitions that kept them contained. Audie allegedly refused to endorse a film Gig was cast in, calling him unstable and masked, revealed a former producer who worked with both men. Murphy recognized in Young something he had seen in combat: the unpredictable danger of a man whose exterior control could shatter at any moment. Young's relationships with women revealed disturbing patterns that should have raised red flags. His multiple marriages were marked by jealousy, control issues, and reports of verbal and sometimes physical abuse. Yet his charm and professional success allowed him to maintain his public image as a sophisticated, slightly melancholic leading man, rather than the troubled, potentially dangerous individual Murphy apparently recognized. "He fooled Hollywood. He didn't fool Audie," said a fellow veteran who knew Murphy. Audie had seen men break under pressure during the war. He recognized the signs of someone whose composure was a thin veneer over chaos. Murphy's assessment of Young was tragically validated in the most horrible way possible. In 1978, 3 weeks after marrying his fifth wife, Kim Schmidt, Young shot her to death before turning the gun on himself in their Manhattan apartment. The murder death shocked Hollywood, but reportedly didn't surprise Murphy, who had allegedly warned associates about Young's potential for violence years earlier. For Murphy, who had experienced genuine violence and its aftermath on the battlefield, Young represented a particularly disturbing case. Someone who had never faced external combat, but was fighting an internal war that eventually claimed not only his life, but that of an innocent victim as well. Murphy understood darkness. He carried his own demons from the war, explained a close friend, but he believed in controlling those impulses, in never allowing personal pain to harm others. Young's final act represented the ultimate failure of that moral responsibility. The tragic end to Young's life revealed the accuracy of Murphy's apparent assessment and raised troubling questions about Hollywood's tendency to dismiss or minimize warning signs in talented performers. Young's charm and skill as an actor had effectively masked his deteriorating mental state and growing potential for violence, a masking that Murphy, with his hard-earned understanding of human nature under pressure, had allegedly seen through years before the tragedy occurred. Thank you, members.